The DC20 0.5 update is live right now, and I'm so excited. We're here to talk about it. If you don't know, hello there. I'm the Dungeon Coach, creator of DC20. We just launched a brand new tabletop roleplay game called DC20 in its 0.4 alpha state. It was fully playable, levels 1 and 2, and I was absolutely floored by the overwhelming positive response that I've gotten from this thing and the amount of community growth from the community that we already had, plus the growth of other YouTubers and other communities coming together to be one big DC20 community. It's been crazy. So first of all, thank you for that, because a lot of these quality of life updates have came from a lot of the playtesting that I've done, playtesting that you guys have done, different feedback that's been swirling around. Overall, I want y'all to know that I am listening. I hear your feedback and the direction that the game keeps moving in. It just keeps getting better and better. And full transparency on why this 0.5 update is so massive compared to maybe what future updates will be as far as the rules, like the base core rules are concerned. During the development of DC20, I got to a spot where I ran out of funding for it in general, and I had to pull the trigger on the release to be able to get it out there to you guys. I knew it was completely playable. It's not where I wanted it to be, but I knew I had to pull the trigger or I'd have to stop the project. That's also why currently you have to pay to play the alpha so that you can support the project in general. But as things get going and as we launch the Kickstarter, I fully plan on having a lot of stuff available for DC20 absolutely for free. We're just going through some of the growing pains right now, and one of those is a lot of the stuff that was fixed in the 0.5 alpha. A lot of things that I really wanted to get to, or I really knew that just the sword maneuver just isn't where I want it to be. Well, now it is with the base rules update, and along with the 0.5 update, along with all the core rules comes the ancestry system. And the ancestry system, it's gonna blow you away. If you have not heard about how the ancestry system works, next week's video is gonna do a full deep dive into how the ancestry system works, giving showcases, examples, and how you can customize your ancestry. That'll be next week's video. This video is the change log of everything that happened as far as the base rules of the game. So whether you've been just watching around casually in videos and you've heard me say stuff and now you see it's going in a different direction, and let me know down below if you like that direction and all that kind of stuff. I really think you will, because it's based off of heavy feedback and heavy playtesting. And this is also for the people that have 0.4 and they want to know just what changed from 0.4 to 0.5, so they don't have to go scan through the document to see what changed. And in the new PDF and all future PDFs, there will be a change log of the different things that changed from each version. And if any of this sounds interesting, you want to get your hands on it yourself, there's going to be a link down in the description. And this link's actually an affiliate link to Duke from One Shot Questers. He is one very massive D&D YouTuber that's came over to the DC20 influencer creation space and has been making content about DC20. We played in a one shot together. He's making one shots and videos over on his channel. Stay tuned for that. So anyone that purchases the PDF through this link actually gives a kickback to him, because I am trying to love and support up all of the different influencers that are making content about DC20. I'm just trying to give back to them too. Unlike how some other TTRPGs have handled their influencers. But anyway, let's dive into the changelog for 0.5. All these rules are gonna be going in order from how you see them in the document. We're gonna go through starting off with attributes. The only rule here, it's not even a rule change, it's just an addition of a variant rule. There's going to be some variant rules added in when there are really interesting, potentially different options to play the game. I don't want to ever prescribe, this is the only way to play the game. If there's a very interesting, I totally see that type of option, I want to implement these variant rules. A lot of variant rules are going to be in the Game Master's Guide, which is a separate book that's going to be releasing later, obviously. But this variant rule has to do with the prime modifier. And what this variant rule says is that your prime, instead of it equaling your highest overall attribute, meaning you have to put a 3 somewhere. Whenever you're making your attributes, you can have a 3 at the highest and -2 at the lowest. And whenever you build your character, you probably should put a 3 somewhere so that you have a prime attribute of 3. It equals your highest overall attribute. Done. That's the core rule. The variant rule makes it to where your prime just equals your maximum attribute always. You don't have to have a 3. It removes that restriction in character creation, although DC20's character creation is wildly more open in comparison to other TTRPGs. But what it does is it removes that to where now you could have 2 points, 1 point, 1.0, 111. You can have a very well-balanced character that's evenly spread across all 4 attributes. You could make that character now, whereas if you were to stick to the core rules, that character, you wouldn't have, your prime would be a little bit lower, but maybe that's what you're okay with that. So this variant rule takes it off the table. It's a bit more open for people that want less restrictions during character creation. And this being added to the game is nothing but a props and shout out to the community over on Discord, in the comment section, on live streams, all of the stuff about hearing you guys' voice on this and really wanting that to at least be represented as a variant rule. Cool. Next up is language mastery. Just like how if you already know the rules, whenever you spend skill points, there is a section of skill points called knowledge skills, arcana, religion, nature, all that. And whenever you spend points in those skills, they're worth twice as effective. So for example, if you put 1 skill point into athletics, you increase athletics. You bubble in one of those bubbles. But if you put a skill point into a knowledge skill, you get 2. You can put 1 point in arcana, 1 point in religion, boom, you got 2. They're twice as effective, showing some love to those intelligence-based things that usually don't get as much spotlight. Now the same thing is true for languages. So whenever you get a trades skill point, or you get a trade/language point, it used to be you can spend them on trades or spend them on languages, whatever. Now you can spend them on trades to get blacksmithing, thieves' tools, whatever you want. 1 point is 1 point, just like normal. But if you spend it on a language, you get 2 points to be able to spend on the language. So you can actually they're twice as effective if you want to learn new languages. And stay tuned for that because there's more stuff coming in languages in 0.6. But next up is the checks and saves. Attack checks and spell checks. There's a new phrase called a spell attack. This is from whenever a spell check targets a defense of some kind. These are going to be like attacking cantrips, like a firebolt. You make a spell check against someone's defense. That is a spell attack. That's just a new phrase, a new coded word there that's going to be kind of showing up. This will make things very clear as far as what attacks are, because there's spell checks made to heal, and then there's spell checks made to damage, and there's that keyword's important. And if you didn't see the video that I had on saves, I did an entire update to saves. There were 6 saves in the game. That's been reduced down to 4 saves. There was some confusion on a physical save and a mental save, and on the character sheet there was a whole section for a physical save and a mental save, which just was the higher of the two. So a physical save was higher between might and agility. Same for a mental save was the higher between intelligence and charisma. Those 2 saves were confusing because they were a save, but then they were also a category, because might and agility are physical saves, but then there's a physical save, and it got confusing. So those are gone, and there are only 4 saves. It's so clean, it's so nice. I have a whole video going into what cool things are coming with saves. You can check that out below as well. But now it's just a might save, agility save, intelligence save, charisma save. Done. There is still a save category called physical save, which is just might or agility. Choose whichever one you want, probably what's higher. And there is still a mental save category, and that category consists of intelligence saves and charisma saves, so that you can still lump them together like that. But at the base of the game, there are 4 saves, which is much cleaner. Next up for defenses, damage reduction. A new kind of damage reduction has been added. There has always been damage reduction. Heavy armor gives damage reduction. Certain things give damage reduction. But it's always only been physical damage reduction, and there wasn't a mental damage reduction. And in the spirit of DC20 and all of the mirrors that it has and the symmetry that this game has, marshals, spellcasters, stamina, mana, etc. There is now mental damage reduction and physical damage reduction. They both work exactly the same, but for those different types of damage. And if you date a heavy hit or higher, the damage reduction is bypassed, like normal. And if we're talking about taking so much damage, and you might get taken enough damage to fall onto death's door. The death's door rule has had its words more just cleaned up, and a lot of these changelog is just rephrasing of rules because I wrote them a certain way, and then when people read them, they sometimes interpret different intentions, and that causes some problems that you'll see, like with the fighter and stuff. That has been reworded entirely to make sure it's very clear as far as how that works, and you can only spend 1 action point while you're on death's door each round. And it's also added that you can no longer maintain concentration while on death's door. Next up is also in damage. There's 3 sections about damage modification, getting bonus damage, mixing different types of damage, how damage works. There's just a bunch of cleanup in the damage section about how to issue damage, just to make it very, very clear, and added more words and text to be able to explain it all. That's also been done for spell duels. There was a very clear as far as who's participating in a spell duel. So now it should be much more clear as far as who's participating, what side, who's casting the spell, what happens if you stop it, all that. All the rules are the same. It's just more clear now. Grappling is now also cleaned up because some people didn't realize while you have a creature grappled, you can move them around your character. So on the grid, if you're right here, you can grapple a creature and move them around you, like spinning, like moving them around you different spaces. You can do that. It costs 1 space to move them. That's part of the grapple condition. It's now written clearly as part of the grapple action. All of that's right there. You can also drag and move them and move. It costs 2 spaces to be able to move because you and them are moving 1 space, right? So it's twice as much movement, but you get the idea. That's always been a rule. Some people just didn't even know you could do that. So the only other action that's been affected in this way is the help action. The help dice now can also be used on spell checks that target mental defense, right? Before it was just attack checks, you couldn't do anything, but you can give a help dice towards a spell check that's targeting mental defense. It used to only be physical defense, but now it's just if you're attacking them. Because if you're a commander and you say, attack them or whatever, you should be able to attack, whether you're targeting their mind or targeting their body, whatever it is, you are attacking them and their allies helping you attack them. So it's a little bit less restrictive to those spellcasters that target mental defense with help dice. Now for maneuvers, we're talking about weapon maneuvers. There were some overall updates to the duration of how long certain maneuvers last. It should last until the next instance of the roll. So if someone's exposed and they have advantage on attacks against them, it would only last for the next attack that they have on them. If they were exposed for a whole round, meaning advantage on them for a whole round, that's very punishing. Or if they have disadvantage on attacks for a whole round, very punishing. So these maneuvers, some of them were unintentionally written differently. So each maneuver has been updated to where now it only lasts for the next instance of the advantage on them or disadvantage. So once they make an attack at disadvantage, now the condition's gone. You spent your action to give them disadvantage, the effect happened, and now it's gone. Now some other effects and definitely spells will last longer than that, but at least maneuvers and the little fighting moves, that's just going to be until the next instance. Then for specific weapon maneuvers themselves, like bows and chained weapons, staves and swords, they have had some updates as far as their active or passive maneuvers. The bow's old passive was a little bit weird, meaning that they gained a +5 on targets behind cover, which then led to some weird things where if someone's behind half cover, you gain a +5. And then now you're better at shooting someone behind half cover than you would be if they're in the middle of a field. That's weird, so it's been rechanged to also mirror and opposite the crossbow. Crossbow, you crit on a 19 or 20 while within close distance, and a bow, now you crit on a 19 or 20 while 10 or more spaces away. And chained weapons also suffer from that same weird thing about gaining a +5 against whatever, but now chain weapons absolutely ignore the penalty. Instead of gaining a bonus to the penalty, they just ignore it and deal 1 more damage. The staff has been completely reworked because there was an unintended game mechanic of there being a maneuver. The staff was the only weapon in the game that lets you use a maneuver to make an attack. That shouldn't be a case. A maneuver should add on to an attack. And then that was the staff was the only weird thing that did it because it was playing with a reaction. That was just weird and unintended. So how maneuvers should work is you make an attack check by spending an action point, and then you can spend extra to boost it in that way. Staff was a little bit different. Now it's been rechanged to a more defensive style and it hindering your target and knocking them prone, other cool things. The sword now also, like I mentioned earlier, the sword was broken at launch. I knew the +5 was like, man, this is just too strong. Like, okay, well, all right, we'll send it now, and we got to do something about it. So as soon as it sent off, I was working on sword mechanic stuff, and you guys agreed it was too much. Being able to add +5, +10, +15 onto one attack is too much. So the new sword maneuver now lets you be able to grant yourself a help die on your next attack check. So if you remember how help dice work, that's a D8 that you get to roll along with your attack check. Super awesome. And I still think this hits that sword fantasy of being able to make big swings and all that kind of stuff, because a D8 is about 4.5 on average of a D8 roll. So it's a little bit of a nerf to the +5. It does still do the same help dice decay where it's a D8, then a D6, then a D4. So that solves the problem of doing it too many times in a row. So yes, you could roll the D8 and it'd be an 8 or a 1, and that's a little bit of swinginess there involved with the sword. I think it's super fun, and the person that used this in a playtest really loved it. But again, let me know what you guys think of all these different updates and changes. Are you excited about all of them? Is there one that you're like, oh, really? Moving on to techniques now. Some of the techniques that involved an attack check and involved dealing damage in this way, they have been reworded and reworked as far as to be and function how they're supposed to be within the context of DC20. You make an attack check versus they roll a saving throw. There's an effect that happens with their save, and there's damage that's dealt with the attack. And now it's very clear. Some of them were like a contest where you had a contest, and if you lost, and it was just not as how it's supposed to be and how it's supposed to be structured in DC20. Spellcasting just had some clarification updates for how mana points work and how are gained or lost, and how spell enhancements work. You can do spell enhancements multiple times. You can stack it multiple times with spending multiple mana as long as you're within your spend limit. So keep that in mind. As you level up, you're going to have a bigger and bigger spend limit. So you could do the same spell enhancements multiple times. Next up is one of the biggest ones and one of the most exciting ones for me is jump distance and fall damage is all now reworked and been so much more simple than it was before. Before there was this how falling worked is you had like it was your jump distance equaled might or agility, take the higher whichever one, and now it's your jump distance. And then if you fall, you reduce the fall damage by amount of feet, and then which would never really happen. So how it works now is your jump distance is equal to your agility. Period. There's also some concerns about the might attribute, and it might, pun intended, it might be too strong. And there's a really weird times where like fighters and barbarians and warlords would have might, and they'd be in heavy armor with might, and then they could jump just as far as the super nimble, agile person with light armor, because jump distance was might or agility take the higher, right? And further just making might even stronger. And agility needs some love. And I think in the spirit of coming from D&D, where dexterity is the god stat, I've heavily avoided that. Maybe too much so. So DC20 agility's needing some love right now, and this is one of the times. And it makes so much sense too, of agility being able to be nimble and quick, and how quickly can you move around in combat. Might being a little bit more strength and constitution combined together. Agility now gets to kind of shine in its little speed and nimbleness way. Same thing with fall damage. You can fall from a height equal to your agility. So if your agility is 2 and you're up you're 2 spaces high up on a wall, you can freely jump down 2 spaces, not need to make a roll, not need to make anything. Your agility, parkour baby, you barrel roll. And if you fall from a height higher than your agility, you can actually make a roll to try and reduce the damage and to subtract your agility off of the damage you take. There's some other stuff there, but basically agility is able to shine a little bit more now with jumping and fall. Next big one here is weapons. Weapons have been readjusted and retuned. All of them. Every weapon category, there's weapon styles like whips and chained weapons and swords and axes and hammers and staves and all that stuff, right? Every single weapon category has 5 weapons in it. There are 3 light weapons and 2 heavy weapons. All of these have been reorganized and rebalanced to where every single one of them is a viable option based on whatever type of play style that you're going for. And there was a note that heavy weapons were just overpowered. They were just too strong, especially whenever they dealt 1 notch higher of damage, and they had extra properties, and the 2-handed weapon was dealing 4 damage. Double the damage of it was just too much. Heavy weapon marshals were just winning the game as far as damage is concerned, even when they're compared to casters spending mana. They were still outperforming them too much. And there's been some more love shown to this earliest little baby weapon. The 1 damage dealing weapon that can be thrown can now be thrown farther. This weapon can now be thrown shorter as far as the 2 damage weapon, which is also now some interesting choice for those throwing weapon type characters. Do you want to have a weapon that deals 2 damage and a shorter throw distance, or 1 damage and a longer throw distance? Now for the heavy weapons, the one of the heavy weapons has reach, still deals 2 damage instead of 3, so that's been knocked down by 1, but it has a permanent reach, which is obviously very strong. And then the violator of this whole thing that was dealt 4 damage has been nerfed down to 3 damage with a 2-hander, but it's been given an impact property, a really cool thing we can do in DC20. The impact property gives you +1 damage on heavy hits and above. So yes, the sword's been nerfed from 4 down to 3, but if you get a heavy hit, you kind of get that 1 point back to be able to still hit hard in the way that big 2-handers are meant to be. And another little note there, and another cool balancing thing, how easy DC20 is to balance. If heavy weapons are still overperforming and that's still too much, we could easily change the impact property to be brutal hits and higher instead of heavy hits and higher, which might be a thing. We'll see what playtesting does. Across the board, all the weapons were just retuned with that effect in mind, with different sorts of whips were involved, and also some special weapons, specifically the rapier and Morningstar / Great Star. A Morningstar is a stick with a ball on the end and has spikes on it. Before it was confusing. The people were like, oh, you get all the maneuvers of a hammer and a pick all in one. Oh my gosh, and it was just too strong. Why would you ever choose a hammer or a pick if you could have both at the same time? So now a super simple change, and you can actually do this yourself with any weapon and reskin and reflavor. This is just a cool example of this. Is a Morningstar functions like a hammer that would normally deal bludgeoning damage, but since it's a Morningstar and has spikes on it, it is a hammer benefiting from the hammer passive properties and a hammer maneuver, but it deals piercing damage. That's the only change. Super simple, super subtle, not broken at all. It's now exactly even with the rest of the weapons, and you can do yours yourself. You can come up with whatever weapon you want, give it some sort of passive, and whatever its maneuver and passive is from one weapon, and you can change the damage type. Simple. I also go into the concept of if you wanted to have a sword, but you really like the axe property, but you really just wanted to have a sword, you can swap and reskin it as well. And after weapons now is armor, and once again, might being king. Oh, the big heavy boys were just a bit too strong. So heavy armor already gives you damage reduction, which is very strong, and it gives 3 bonus armor to your physical defense, while light armor doesn't have damage reduction and only has 1 physical defense. So right now the adjustment is we are bringing heavy armor down to 2 as a bonus. It still gets 1 physical damage reduction. That's still a thing. But now the bonus armor is 2. And I could also see this heavy armor getting nerfed down to 1. So it would be simple enough of if I have armor on, I get a +1. If that's light armor, that's it. But if that's heavy armor, I gain 1 damage reduction. That's the whole point of heavy armor. But I don't want to make that adjustment yet. So now it's just gone from 3 down to 2. Shields also now received a little nerf in a very niche way that people are playing it, of wielding 2 shields at the same time. Shields used to deal an amount of damage equal to the amount of armor that it granted, the amount of physical defense bonus that it had. So heavy shields would be 2 and they would deal 2 damage. Now, all shields just deal 1 damage. There's no way a shield is going to be more impactful than someone using a sword or an axe or some sort of actual weapon. So shields, yes, you can make attacks with them, but it is 1 damage. For conditions, now there's a whole section at the bottom of conditions that talks about stacking conditions and how certain conditions operate when stacking. Exposed, for example, can stack an infinite number of times. You could be exposed from a guiding bolt, exposed from a maneuver, exposed from some sort of curse that's on you. I don't know. You could have 3 exposed on you. So now the next attack on you would have an attack roll at triple advantage. Oh my God. Now keep in mind, a lot of the exposed condition would drop off because after that happened, a lot of those things would go away. Guiding bolt doesn't last forever. It's just the next attack. But now something like the taunted condition, where you have your focus set on a certain individual. If you have the taunted condition, if someone else taunts you, you can't be doubly taunted by both of them. So your taunt would change to the new one. It goes into more detail on each one with each different instance, but I just want to have a nice clear spot there for when people are like, wait, what happens now? Now for player character creation, and then we're going to get in the classes here. Your starting attributes, your standard array, instead of being 3, 1, 0, -1, is now 3, 1, 0, -2. And there's now a 1 more negative on your stat, which might feel like a nerf. Oh my gosh, that's a nerf. Dungeon Coach just nerfed the game. Oh my God, everyone's nerfed. But instead of only 1 point to spend to be able to put wherever you want, you now get 2. And I think that just overall feels better during character creation, to be able to be like, okay, I have my standard array and I have 2 more points now. Where do I want to spend these 2 points? Yes, you could put one of them into the -2 to bring it back to a -1, and now you're back to where we started, but at least you have that creative choice. And you start the game off with having a maximum of 3, which is the attribute cap, and a minimum of -2, which is the minimum. I've also added little extra updates to both the point buy and the roll method to make sure they're all mathematically 100% balanced and equal. And also for character creation, ancestries have been added into the game. There are 10 ancestries added in 0.5, with many more to come, but it's going to be human, elf, dwarf, gnome, halfling, the core races, if you want to call them that. And the more exotic ancestries would be orc, dragonborn, giantborn, angelborn, and fiendborn. So you got your angels, devils, dragons, and giants, and your orcs. Now, like I said, stay tuned for next week's video where I dive into how that looks, give you a little sneak peek of it if you haven't seen it for yourselves yet. And I really am excited to show you all this ancestry system of how it works in DC20. So now, as of the 0.5 update, you are now truly able to make 100% verified level 1 characters. Every level 1 character you've made before this has been missing that ancestry traits. You get 5 different points worth of traits that you get to be able to customize your character with. You get them now. And speaking of character customization, there's also 4 new talents that have been added into the game. Whenever you hit level 2, you get a talent, and that usually had to be spent in multi-classing to be able to go steal talents from other classes. But now there are 4 more talents that have a little bit more, and that's going to probably keep happening with each update. Little bundles of talents coming around. And speaking of multi-classing, the entire multi-classing system has just been reworded. The rules essentially are the same, but the way it's been presented has been much more clean and much more easy to understand. Now for the class updates, I was going to make this a separate video, and if this video does terrible, maybe I should not have such a long video for one thing. But now this is the class updates. Each class, I'm going to go through each class about what different things changed. So now you can know what happened to your favorite classes and maybe what happened to your not as favorite classes to make them your favorite classes. But first I want to start off by actually showing you something in the actual master document itself here. Also one clarification point here. Up here at the top where it said attribute points and skill points, in the document it says like parentheses 5 start and parentheses 2 start, and that was just confusing because you already have them in character creation. So I think it's much more clear to have this be blank, and this is when you get other ones and you already have made your character and you've chosen the fighter. There you go. Anyway, moving on. Here's the difference right now, and it's exactly on your screen. There used to be a fighter class feature right here at the very top called Fighter Marshal feature, which had All of these things that you see here, combat masteries, maneuvers and weapons, techniques known, stamina points known, and for the spellcasters, this gave them mana, this gave them a spell list, this gave them cantrips and spell. That's the starter kit booster pack for a class to be able to function at the most baseline level. That's now been separated. Instead of it being a feature all down there together, where you can also see where this fighter stamina used to be. The fighter stamina used to be a bullet point line right here. It used to be right there. It said fighter stamina. It was part of that feature, but then it was weird because you could take that feature and it got some weird clunky things, especially when it came to multi-classing. So now this is not how it is anymore, and the fighter stamina has been separated from that and is now its own standalone feature. And when you choose a fighter, you get all of these things as your fighter martial mastery. Bit more clear in presentation now. But now, what happened to the fighter? What does the fighter actually get? Their stamina has been updated to be understand there was a different interpretation that was intended. People thought that if you spent stamina on a maneuver, then you got back stamina. That was not the case. And people also thought that if you spent multiple action points on multiple maneuvers, you gained back multiple stamina. And people were gaining back chunks of 2 and 3 stamina all in one moment. And that has now been fixed for the fighter stamina feature, where if you do a maneuver and you don't spend stamina on it, you gain 1 stamina back. Also, there were some things revolving physical damage reduction, and there was, if you were to combine things from fighter and certain ancestries and certain this and certain that's and the monk's defensive and all these other things, you could stack damage reduction to the point where you had a broken amount at level 1. One of those things is the fighter's heavily armored fighting style has been removed. It will come back in another form at later levels 5 or 8 possibly, but it is just, there's no more damage reduction that the fighter can pick up, again, on top of already having it. Action Surge has a once on each of your turns restriction put on it, because there's some weird things people were doing where they were doing an action surge, doing stuff, doing an action surge again, and then off their turn they were action surging, and it was just popping off all the time, which was not the intent at all. So now it's much more in line. Second Wind has now had a facelift and an upgrade. Instead of the normal, pilot over from D&D where you just spend a thing and you gain a healing thing and that's it. Second Wind now has it triggers around Death's Door, and whenever you would get taken to Death's Door, you have this little surge of a drill and a second wind, which is what Second Wind actually is, and you kick up and you have some extra stuff. For the Barbarian, it's super simple. Their Savage Defense was usually based on their Might attribute, which then forced Barbarians to have to do Might for that. So now it's based off of Prime, and that's the concept of when I see the Prime modifier, which I try to avoid usually. But I think for the Monk also, the Monk's Patient Defense, their unarmored defense, they can add their Prime attribute onto their armor class, just like the Barbarians in this way. So it doesn't force the Barbarian to have to do Might and force the Monk to have a high attribute of Intelligence or Charisma. It just opens that up, and that's the purpose of Prime, letting the class shine on what a class is supposed to be good at. A class is supposed to be good at that. So you can have an agility barbarian and not be nerfing your armor. And since jump distance has changed to be only agility, barbarians specifically though have a special feature that lets them be able to use their might for their jump distance. Perfect for barbarians. And there might be a psionic type of feature coming soon that lets you be able to use your intelligence to be able to jump and levitate. You see where I'm going. Anyway, the Paladin's HP table has been updated. They were supposed to get 1 health hit point at level 1. That's updated. And the Paladin's stamina has been updated to where you have to be spending mana to be able to regain stamina in this way. You spend mana to heal somebody, or someone spends mana to heal you. It's that magic that recharges your stamina. It's not just a Warlord's Inspiring Presence or a medicine check in some way where you get healed from these mundane means. That was triggering Paladin stamina gain, and some people had some builds that they were doing like that. That was not intended, and that is now fixed. Warlord, yes. Their commander's call for the Warlord has been buffed. You used to be able to take dodge, move, or attack action. The dodge gave you a full dodge action, which is worth 2 action points to take a full dodge, right? Move just lets you move, and that was it was technically only 1 action point. So it was buffed to where you get to move, and creatures have disadvantage on opportunity attacks against you. Cool, that's worth 2 action points. And the attack was just an attack. Now it's an attack at advantage. That really brings everything in line between all 3 options and really makes the commander's call still worth it, and not a whole huge action point sink to spend action points and stamina to then only get 1. It now balances out. Rangers getting some love. They now get to pick 2 favored terrains. Favored terrains across all of them were balanced out to be not really nerfed in general, but they were all balanced out to be even with each other, and now you get to pick 2 of them. And I think that widens the scope of Rangers' terrain abilities and widens also the chance of them being in their favorite terrain if we give them multiple. Natural Hunter, the 2nd level feature, which gave a whole bunch of little kits to make them feel more like a hunter. The difficult terrain, avoiding difficult terrain has been removed, so that's technically a little bit of a nerf, but I didn't think it was needed right now for the ranger, and there's other ways to pick up ignoring difficult terrain, and maybe future things for the ranger as well, or a talent in general. And then also hunter's equipment has been replaced with hunter's strikes. This is a feature that lets rangers be able to imbue and enhance and add on extra effects more than any other martial to add fire, poison, grapple arrows, other sort of conditions onto their attacks. And when I say arrows, you can also do weapons. You can put fire on your swords and make a fiery sword attack. You can put fire on your arrows and launch a fire arrow. These now cost stamina to be able to perform instead of the hunter's equipment, which had this really weird interaction where people could make infinite amounts across downtime and then use them, and it's now much more clean. Monk has the most amount of reworks. Oh my gosh, I probably should do a whole another video on the monk. But the monk across the board is just overall buffed, because it was known for the monk to be underperforming, and I wanted to test out its style of play, and the style of play works, and now we get to buff it to be in line with all the other classes, right? So stamina, instead of not spending an action, when you don't spend an action, you turns into a stamina. When you take the dodge action, you gain a stamina, right? So now you gain it a bit, just like the warlord takes a help action and gains a stamina point, the monk takes the dodge action and gains a stamina point. The concept of inward energy turned to outward energy, and the whole circle of energy and everything like that. So also whenever you dodge an attack, you gain stamina back. So there's some interesting things as far as buffs for stamina regeneration for monks. And for flurry of blows and unarmed strikes, you can now make 4 unarmed strikes without any sort of multiple check penalty kicking in. So you can freaking throw in them fists and kicks and headbutts, go nuts. Patient defense, like I said, is now based off of the prime modifier, and you're not forced to pick intelligence or charisma. Step of the wind now has an amount equal to your jump distance. You can run across water that many spaces. You can run up walls that many spaces. So you get wall running and water running just a little bit at the baseline monk. And there's also some updates to the stances in general, because there's some people were thinking that they could use big heavy weapons in a monk stance. The monk stances are meant to have either a passive effect to overall agility or movement or something like that, or buffs to unarmed strikes, not weapons. A monk still easily could use a weapon. It could use a weapon in their hand. They could have a staff or something, do a maneuver with a staff, and then make an unarmed strike, because their unarmed strikes don't get disadvantaged. So that would totally work for a monk. I'm super excited where the monk's at right now. It's insane. For the scion got a whole bunch of love. Its mind blast has now been increased from 5 spaces to 10 spaces now, so they can keep their distance back a little bit. Telekinetic shove and telekinesis have been combined together to just be an overall super sick telekinesis, which basically lets you grapple people with your mind and use martial grapple maneuvers at a distance of 5 spaces. So the same thing that your martial buddy can do as far as grabbing somebody and throwing them, knocking them prone, restraining them, you can do with your mind 5 spaces away, and you use your spell checks to do it instead of physical athletics checks. The level 2 mind sense feature also has some buffs where you spend mana to use the mind sense feature, expanding your mind to reach out to sense others, and for free you can do one of the 2 things that they have as an option to be able to put some sort of effect on somebody, and then you can spend more mana to do it again and again. Big quality of life and overall buff to the mind sense feature. The cleric order, clerics. The priest order, whenever you chose a cleric, you get 3 orders. There was scribe, guardian, and priest. The priest option was very basic. You just increase all healing by +1. So it was just a little bit lackluster, and that type of feature I think fits more so for a cleric light domain subclass, and the subclass grants you bonus healing and other things for healing. For priest, I wanted to do something a little bit different and spicy to add to some gameplay and play style. Now whenever a priest heals somebody, they also share in that holy healing. They heal for 1 point as well. And for our sorcerer friend, overload was a bit punishing, and I think the punishing part was the amount of damage that they take. So the DC on the mental save that you make to avoid taking damage has gone from 15 down to 10. A little bit of love there for the sorcerers, especially if you had a little bit low health and they're taking damage. And that's the characters, which brings us to the last thing of spells. A little bit of update with spells. Fog Cloud got a cool little extra bonus of if you're within 1 space of somebody in the fog, you're not at disadvantage anymore. It's like you found each other in the fog and you're like, and you can make attacks as normal. Psychic Fear had a little something having to do with deafened condition for some way, like removing deaf because it's a mind psychic thing. So that's been updated to not interact with that. There's also been 3 new spells added into the game of Death Bolt, Poison Bolt, and Acid Bolt. Cool stuff from the Cleric and the Fiendborn being able to kind of cast those types of things. Those spells are now at the very bottom of the new spell lists. And all of the Bolt spells, which the Bolt spells are just the simple name for attack cantrips. You are shooting some sort of projectile of magic at somebody. Done. They've been just reworded to be very clear. People thought they would cost 2 action points because the cost said 1, and then in the paragraph it said spend 1 action point, so people thought it was 2. No. Just like a marshal spends 1 action point to swing their sword, a spellcaster spends 1 action point to shoot their magic. Simple. And that's it. That is the Alpha 0.5 update changelog. I can't wait to show y'all the 0.6 one because I just truly love making these videos. Maybe it's the lifelong gamer of me to where all the games that I would play, I'd love to see the little changelog updates of what new game updates were. I'm going to keep making these for you guys and keep you up to date on all of that. And if you want to stay even more up to date, you can check out and join my Patreon. On Patreon, every single week, I do patron-only live streams where I develop the game live with patrons, asking for feedback prompts. We vote on which direction to go on certain things and what gets made next. And if Patreon's not for you, we still do public live streams for everybody. That's been popping off and growing. I've been doing giveaways all the time on there. That's been so much fun. So check that out every single Tuesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you guys so much. I truly cannot thank y'all enough. The amount of support and love that I've felt from you guys and the excitement from the people that play this game and get to see other people play this game and try to pick up themselves and do it one shot and say, hey, you know what? Maybe there's something to this game. So thank you guys so much. Stay creative. Think outside the box. Peace.